I'm not gonna screw around with your time today. I know that it's valuable, and so I'm appreciative that you've carved out some uh, to be with us here today. I anticipate maybe 30, 35 minutes of content, and then that also depends on the questions that come in as well. But here's the agenda. And before I get started, let me just share a little bit about my background with you. I think it's important. As a matter of fact, I was driving today listening to NPR, and a lawyer, I forget her name, had written a few books, and she was talking about uh, the sources of information and being able to trust those sources of information. And so I want you to be able to trust what I'm going to tell you here today, because it's nothing but the truth. I have been in the pharmaceutical industry, essentially being a key part of every part of the U.S. pharmacy reimbursement distribution system, working with the manufacturer, negotiating with PBMs while with that manufacturer, paying them rebates, owning a mail order pharmacy, and then also with the manufacturer, I carried the bag, was a drug sales rep for a couple of years. So I know what doctors go through on a daily basis, and I know what patients, the struggles they have with, out-of-pocket costs and deductibles and that sort of thing. I've seen it firsthand. So manufacturer side, and then also owning a mail order pharmacy. And so when you own a pharmacy, you deal with wholesalers. You negotiate with them directly, and you procure your product for them. And so my frustration from those two experiences led me to starting what was the first fiduciary model PBM. And so the webinar today isn't about that. I just want you to be able to trust the source of the information. So that's why I'm sharing that with you. If you have any questions for me, there are two ways to get those questions to me. You can unmute yourself and raise your hand, and then there's that tool there on your control panel here, or you can just send a question to me via chat. When we have a break in the action, I will get to that question. And so by the end of this presentation today, I'm hoping three things will happen. I want you to know how PBMs make money. And it's if you haven't participated in any of my webinars or been a part of our education courses, or maybe not read the blog, how they make money is going to be different than maybe you've experienced in the past, and what I'm going to share with you today. I want you to feel something other than indifference about what you learned today. I'm going to talk about, uh, making change, the readiness scale at the conclusion, uh, which goes to initiating change and what all that entails. I'm going to spend 10 seconds on that. And then I want you to take some action, right? And that action I want you to take, we're going to talk about that at the end. So plan sponsors today, especially around specialty drugs, when you ask what their primary concern around the pharmacy benefit is, inevitably it's going to come back something around price or transparency. And by the way, the struggle going forward, when we talk about healthcare benefits, that fight is going to be on the pharmacy side. Medical is always going to be important, but going forward, that fight is going to be on the pharmacy side in terms of efficiency and eliminating waste. The major fight is going to be on the pharmacy side. So our problem that we've identified, it's not uh, discounts necessarily off of AWP. It isn't minimum rebate guarantees being too low. It necessarily, all of these are pieces, but really, let me go back. I forget who said this, Black and Decker or something like that said, we don't sell drills, we sell the hole in the wall. Right? We don't sell drills, we sell the hole in the wall. PBMs have you focused on discounts off of AWP and rebates, but really what they're keyed in on is information asymmetry, which means we want the information. We also want all the knowledge to interpret that information, and we're going to leverage that to our financial advantage. So they are using information to their financial advantage. I'm going to give you a real good example of that, because by leveraging information asymmetry, you can't determine how much money they're making. That's the hole in the wall. The drill is the discounts off of AWP. It's the minimum rebate guarantees. The hole in the wall is how much money the PBM is making. Here's a prime example of this. And by the way, this particular email, and let me blow this up because I want to make sure you can see this. This particular email came from a director of compensation and benefits at a large health plan. Okay, at a large health plan who themselves have over 15,000 employees. They couldn't get their own information to be able to determine whether or not what they were being charged was fair and reasonable. Forget trying to figure out how much money the PBM was making. And then the broker gave them some excuse. We're just as upset about this as you are. Give me a break. Give me a break. They couldn't get the data from their own peers within the same company. That is information asymmetry at its best. And people, purchasers of PBM services, are buying it. Part of the reason we're here today is to get this change. This is an example of what information success or information symmetry looks like. And that is when rebates are paid, the employer in this case gets a receipt of those rebates, gets a receipt of the payments received by the PBM for those rebates. And it's at the claim level. It's claim level detail. So plan ID and all that is, we've removed that. We redacted that for privacy reasons, obviously. But, a client in an arrangement where the PBM offers full disclosure, radical transparency, they should be receiving this level of detail. What it allows a purchaser of PBM service to do is what? Determine lowest net cost. That's the benefit of having this level of detail. So instead of receiving rebates in a bucket of dollars, a single line item, each claim that was paid a rebate, now you get that detail. Now you can be able to start to see how much that drug actually costs. More importantly, you're able to determine whether or not the PBM is keeping any of it and how much of it they may or may not be keeping. So that leads me to the status quo. And here's what typically happens. A purchaser of PBM services, a healthcare plan sponsor, enters into a deal with a pharmacy benefit manager that calls for artificially too low PBM administrative fees. The cool thing about administrative fees is that of these 4 fees that you see on your screen, it's the only transparent one. It's the only one where if it's a PMPM or a per paid claim fee, you can account for the money. And so the PBM says, well, we're not going to charge you an administrative fee, or we're going to charge you something artificially too low, $1.50, $2 PMPM, $3 per claim, something along those lines, which essentially gives the PBM a blank check to augment that artificially too low admin fee in the back end with these hidden cash flows. That is where the information asymmetry game begins, in the contract, folks. It is the contract which is going to dictate how the PBM is going to make money. That's why when PBMs say we're transparent, they all say, no PBM says, no, we're not transparent. They all say we're transparent. What they're really saying is, we're giving you a contract and we're leaving it up to you to be able to decide whether or not you like the amount of transparency that we're offering. And by the way, the artificially too low admin fee, it isn't just about the pharmacy benefit. Because when you have integrated care delivery now, where you have a let's go carved in arrangement instead of integrated care. Let's say you have a carved in arrangement where essentially the carrier and the PBM are owned by the same company. Now they can come in and say, if you forego rebates on the pharmacy side, we'll give you a credit, an admin fee credit on your medical administrative fee. We'll give you a credit on your medical administrative fee. It is the same game, just a different name. This here is a second source of the previous slide that I just shared with you, and how PBMs make money. Now, the manufacturer I work with, Eli Lilly. I remember this. I was in the auditorium negotiating these rebates with PBMs during this time. It was the small molecule brand drug rebates that were driving PBM revenues. And then you got smart. And then the PBMs, through a process called ballooning, that's the technical name, is when one revenue source is cut off, they shift that lost revenue, that cost, somewhere else. They then shifted it, remember mandatory mail order, they shifted it here. And then you have the any willing provider laws, and so that said you can't force members to use only your pharmacy. And so then when that happened, PBMs shifted that cost to the specialty drug rebates. And now you're getting smarter about that. There's alternative funding programs that address that, those specialty drug programs as well. Now you're getting smart, benefiting more from those programs and those rebates, which lowers the amount of money the PBMs can make. So what do? They shift it again. And so these go down, and then this is going up, and this is MBDCs, or medical benefit drug claims, the wild, wild west. It is confusing enough for many brokers and PBM consultants and directors of benefits and senior vice presidents of HR. It is complicated enough to offer a pharmacy benefit program, let alone to have many of these same drugs be dispensed under the medical benefit, and you don't have all the tools under the medical benefit to manage the drugs as you do under the pharmacy benefit. Formularies, utilization management programs, dose optimization programs, things like that, right? And so the PBMs now have shifted the lost revenue from all these sources. They're shifting it to the medical benefit side, and it's the wild, wild west. And in many cases, those charges just seem made up and charging whatever they feel like they can get away with. But before I move on, a PBM doesn't have to be owned or own an insurance carrier to be able to manage drugs on the medical side. Any PBM today, if that is a part of its program, it's not just managing drugs on the pharmacy benefit. They're managing on the medical by moving those drugs from the medical to the pharmacy benefit. So it may seem like I'm bashing PBMs. I'm not. I believe we offer a very valuable service. But my frustration is with the hidden cash flows to non-fiduciary PBMs, and some of the methods that they use. And I'm going to focus on these three here. Stay with me. But before I do that, it's important you have at least a basic understanding of the U.S. pharmacy reimbursement distribution system. And so, as a pharmacy benefit manager, I'm going to start with the contractual relationship. We contract with pharmacies because we have to have sites or facilities that can dispense product to our plan participants. And we have to have clients to be able to offer these and sell these services to. Their healthcare plan sponsors that you see there, employers, small, medium, large, unions, coalitions, cities, state governments. It's a pretty long list of potential clients for us. Now, in terms of the financial flow, we reimburse those pharmacies for the prescriptions that they dispense, and then we bill our clients for those dispensed prescriptions. And so without even keying in on it, you can start to see where some of the pain points are from a healthcare plan sponsor standpoint. There's three problems with this particular diagram from the plan sponsor point of view. The first one, the inflow of cash in the form of rebates is too low. I shared with you two slides from two different reputable sources that say 50% of the PBM's profit is coming from where? The manufacturer. So that means the PBM, when it receives money from the manufacturer, it's keeping too much of it and not passing those dollars on to the healthcare plan sponsor that helps to reduce costs. The second problem with this particular diagram is the outflow of cash to cover ingredient costs back to the PBM from the healthcare plan sponsor. The reason for that, I'm going to touch on here in a second, but there's a third problem that isn't so obvious when you look at this particular diagram. Take a look at who sits at the top of this system. You do. Your clients do. But you know the least about how it works. I could go one step further. Information asymmetry is the big problem that we've identified. But the real reason PBMs can leverage it, non-fiduciary PBMs can leverage information asymmetry, is because there's a big gap in PBM literacy. Just the education around beyond the functional role of what we do. Of course, we adjudicate claims and we design benefits, and we have step therapy and prior authorization programs. Everyone knows that. What else do you know? That's the big issue, and that's why we do these webinars. And so I talked about the second problem, the reimbursement back to the PBM from the healthcare plan sponsor being too high. That's called a spread. A spread isn't an accident. It isn't a billing error. It's intentional. And so the drug pricing standard, which forms the basis for discounted prices, is known as average wholesale price. And again, I know people dislike the AWP and this, that. The AWP isn't the problem. It isn't. The AWP isn't the problem. And so from a pharmacy perspective in the business, we call AWP ain't what's paid. And so generic drugs have two prices, folks. Let's call them price benchmarks. And those aren't the only two, but primarily two price benchmarks determine generic drug prices. The AWP, which is going to be minus a discount, and then the MAC. AWP is a list price. It's artificially inflated. No one pays it. The MAC is not a list price. It actually reflects transactional costs in the marketplace. Yet it too is still higher than the actual acquisition cost, or in other words, the invoice cost. What a pharmacy pays a wholesaler or a manufacturer to put the product on the shelf. Let's take a look here at a real world example. This is something I post on my blog, blog.transparentrx.com, every Thursday. And so it's invoice cost of products. And so let's take a look at a levothyroxine here, 100 micrograms, 30 tablets. I want you to see, and the AWP that we're reporting comes from Medispan. The AWP is created by the manufacturer. They determine the AWP, and then they report it to price reporting services like First Data Bank and Medispan. And this is where we take our data from. So this isn't Tyrone's AWP. This is Medispan's AWP. And the differences in cost between invoice and AWP that you see on this screen is consistent. Okay, it is consistent. Now you may say, well, Tyrone, you said AWP isn't the problem. It isn't. The problem is understanding what the drugs cost in the first dang place. That's the issue. If you know that, you can work with AWP. You can work with any price benchmark. So let's take a look at levothyroxine here. AWP is 561, and so I'm going to do AWP here, and I'm using a mouse. All right, so work with me here. AWP here. The AWP, let's call it 560. Now, plan sponsor negotiates a discount for brand and generic drugs off of AWP. And in this case, we're using generic drugs. And let's say the discount, the effective discount that you achieve throughout the year, whether the drug was dispensed at AWP minus or MAC or UNC, whatever it was, let's say the effective rate that you achieved was 85%. So effective rate means we're combining all of the drugs and all of the benchmarks used to determine what you were billed or your client was billed. And we're backing that into a discount off of AWP. And that discount is 85%. 85% off of 560. It's a little bit more, but let's call it 475. 85% discount off of 560 is a $475 discount. To the untrained eye, you're winning. To the untrained eye, you are winning. And so now you have a cost here remaining of 85 bucks. All right. After the 85% discount, the cost remaining is still 85 bucks. Take a look at what this drug costs to put on the shelf. $4. That's what it costs to put on the shelf. That's what the pharmacy paid. The PBM could reimburse the pharmacy for the cost of the product and 100% markup, and let's call it a $2 dispensing fee. That's $10 out of the PBM's pocket. And by the way, having been a part of a retail or mail order pharmacy, I can tell you independent pharmacies would be jumping through the roof to get 100% markup on generic drugs. Some of them take losses. I used to be in the oil business, and you see gas prices. Before I got into the pharmaceutical industry, about a year and a half, I was in the oil business, Marathon Oil Company, and was kind of like a district manager and had all these stores. And I was shocked to learn that a gallon of gasoline, you see prices now $4. You know, an independent operator of a gas station, gasoline prices are $4. You know, they'd be lucky to make a quarter out of that $4 per gallon. Between the oil companies and the taxes, they're lucky to make a quarter per gallon at $4 a gallon. And that's no exaggeration. And so the joke was the gas was used to draw people into the stores, the convenience stores, and that's where they made their money. The same can be said for independent pharmacists. The drugs are being used to draw people into the stores in hopes that they buy other products and services. And so the PBM pays out $10. They are left with a $75 spread. Now, let's say this drug was on the MAC list. The PBM's out of pocket doesn't change. But let's say on the MAC list, the product was listed at $15. The PBM's out of pocket doesn't change. Now it keeps $5. That's the importance of having a robust, radically transparent MAC list, because if the generic drug isn't on the MAC list, its cost is going to be determined by AWP minus, and this is what can and will happen. All right, that is how spreads work. Don't believe me? State of Ohio, a couple years ago, decided it was going to pivot. I am now providing you with facts of everything I've just told you up to this point. State of Ohio, a couple years ago, decided, you know what, we're not going to focus on, and by the way, this isn't anecdotal, okay? Their PBM literacy shot up. They improved their PBM literacy. They put their egos to the side. We've been doing this for 2 decades. We've been through so many RFPs. We know this. We got this. Except you don't got this. So they decided we're not going to look at rebate guarantees and discounts off of AWP and ASP plus. And what we want to know is how much money you're making. They say, what we want to know is how much money you're making. They eliminated the benefit of information asymmetry. And when they started to look at it from that perspective, what they uncovered was almost $250 million annually just in spreads. This from a governing body with very smart people with unlimited resources. And so if Greg were here today, to a woman, to a man, he would tell you this isn't information, not necessarily information we've never had before. Of course it isn't. But more importantly, it is information you never thought to look at and evaluate and demand before. That was the problem. So when they learned of the $250 million in spread, close to $250 million, they terminated the contracts on the spot. They did the right thing. Learned the information, decided for themselves whether or not that amount was fair and reasonable. They determined almost overnight, no, it wasn't reasonable. It wasn't fair. We're terminating the contracts. you get to the spreads and the $250 million in overpayments. And by the way, public organizations where managing healthcare, I can't talk about healthcare. I don't know much about the medical side other than the drug piece. Don't know much about it, but the drug piece. The misleading contract language is what starts or gives the PBMs the permission to generate huge, huge spreads. That's where it starts. And so with MAC list, right, the employer's MAC list is going to be less comprehensive and less aggressive than the pharmacy MAC list. That means the pricing isn't going to be as aggressive, so the employers charge more, and the MAC list isn't going to have as many drugs on it as the pharmacy's MAC list. The pharmacy MAC list that the PBM offers in terms of reimbursement can be different than the MAC list the PBM offers up to its clients. That's what generates spreads. Rebates by many names. In the slide, the U.S. Pharmacy Reimbursement Distribution slide, I said the first problem, the inflow of cash, was too low, because if you remember that particular slide, it said formulary rebate. PBMs drive the renaming of those dollars from manufacturers in an effort not to be contractually obligated to pass them all back. How else are 50% of their profits going to be driven through manufacturer revenue? Information asymmetry. Manufacturers have a bucket of dollars that they are willing to pay. And then the PBMs say, we want 10% of those dollars to go to formulary rebates. We want another 10 to go access rebates. We want another 25 to go to administrative fees, which are manufacturer administrative fees, which are different than the administrative fees paid to the PBM on a per paid claim or PEPM basis to get access to electronic claims adjudication services, to get access to a member portal and 24/7 customer service. That administrative fee is different than this administrative fee, but to the untrained eye, they might believe they're the same thing, and they are far from it. The point I'm making is that any monies paid by a manufacturer to a PBM, the healthcare plan sponsor should know what it amounts to the penny. And then if you want to then go ahead and share a piece of that with the PBM, that's okay, as long as you believe, as long as you know what the amount is and you believe it is fair and reasonable to you. Express Scripts sued Kaleo, and this was just aired. The lawsuit took place a few years, 4 or 5 years back, but the information wasn't made available until about 2.5 years ago. But within that, this is what you're able to decipher, even though a lot of that lawsuit is made public, was redacted. But here's what you're able to decipher from that. Express Scripts sued Kaleo for rebates that it allegedly owed. Kaleo refused to pay. And here are the numbers. That administrative fee that I talked about, this is the manufacturer administrative fee, right? This is the manufacturer administrative fee here. It doesn't say that, but that's what it is. It dwarfs the formulary rebate. Look at this. So if in the contract, If those dollars aren't accounted for in the rebate language, the PBM could keep it, and it would. Again, here we're adding price protection rebates, sometimes referred to as inflationary uh, fees or rebates. And again, these dwarf even the formulary and the administrative fees. If the contract language isn't radically transparent, the PBM or if these rebates aren't addressed in the contract language to be passed on to the plan sponsor, again, every PBM says we're passed through and we're transparent. When they say that, it can have various meanings, different from what you perceive them to mean. Outcomes rebates, another one. PBMs have been negotiating these directly, and rebate aggregators have been negotiating these directly with manufacturers for over 10 years now. And for certain drugs, high cost drugs, if it doesn't perform to the metric that was established in the contract between the PBM or the rebate aggregator and the manufacturer, if it falls short, either all the cost is refunded or a portion of the cost is refunded. A rebate is a refund. There was a bunch of talk about the government and legislation requiring PBMs to pass through all manufacturer revenues back to the plan sponsors or apply them at the point of sale for members. Been talk about that for a while, and requiring more transparency from PBMs to share how much money they're bringing in from the manufacturers. So PBMs, what did I talk about? Ballooning, shifting cost. They're usually 5-10 years ahead. And so what they did was formed rebate aggregators and manage them under a group purchasing organization arrangement. And so now they can charge what's called GMF or GPO management fees. Instead of having to now keep the rebates, they can charge these fees to manufacturers and they wouldn't be labeled as rebates. Same game, different name. Again, like AWP, isn't bad as long as you know what it is and the information that you need to determine whether or not your cost or your client's cost is fair and reasonable. I'm not suggesting that GMF fees are bad. What I'm suggesting is that if you don't know what to look for, it can be bad for you. If the PBM is allowed to leverage its clients' unsophistication to its financial advantage. That's what we're trying to eliminate here. So the bottom line here is this. You got to know what the PBM is being paid. I don't care if people come out with, we're going to charge you NADAC plus a higher fee. We're transparent. We're fiduciary. Don't care. Can I determine what I'm paying you? At the end of the day, that's what matters the most, because whatever the PBM keeps, those are monies that would lower your costs at the end of the day. At the end of the day, whatever the PBM keeps, if the PBM keeps a reasonable per paid claim fee and passes everything back. And another PBM has these great clinical programs, and we're going to charge you a reasonable, an artificially low admin fee, or we're going to charge you NADAC plus, but we're not going to give you the information to determine whether or not that's fair and how much money you're making. At the end of the day, this is the number that matters most. You've heard the saying, I mean, I've heard it so many times, but it's true. Trust but verify. If you can't verify, don't trust. The significance of the PBM's take home, what it is putting in its bank account, I just touched on it. The genius of this business model. The genius of this business model is that the PBM's take home is hidden right here in the plan's final cost. That's the beauty of it. So when the PBM is keeping money here, right? When it is keeping spreads here, and when it is keeping revenue from the manufacturer, its clients' costs go up. See, there's a lot of talk about PBMs are adding costs to the supply chain, but they don't understand how it's happening. Case in point, and I'm wrapping up here. Give me 3 minutes. Case in point. This is CVS's Health CEO at the time. At an earnings call. So saying one thing to analysts and then another thing to clients, I can't stand it. I just can't stand hypocrites. I just can't stand it. Here's what in layman's terms. Here's in layman's terms what he said. And this is public information, by the way. Okay, this is on the internet. In layman's terms, this is what he said. We are going to make as much money as we possibly can. The amount of money that we are going to make is going to ultimately depend upon how sophisticated or unsophisticated our clients might be. Couldn't get past the third word without mentioning contracts. Yet, in competitive bidding processes with self-funded employers and others in RFPs or whatever it is that you might do, the contract is the last thing addressed. Or if it's brought up at the end, right, it's just for show, and then really it's not really addressed until the end. And then by the time you get to the end, you're focused on the BAA language, the Business Associates Agreement, and not focusing on the lack of transparency in the pricing. And then now you're running up against getting ID cards in the hands of the members. So now you just have to push it through because you've selected the winner before you've agreed to terms in the contract, before you've memorialized radical transparency in the contract. You've already selected the PBM. It takes brains and it takes guts to get radical transparency. This is an acronym that we came up with internally. I talked about what the PBM is putting in his bank account. This particular slide here is worth the price of admission, folks. Everything in green lands in the PBM's bank account. Red, cash disbursements leave the PBM's bank account. An example would be a share of what? Manufacturer revenue. That's a cash disbursement. Reimbursement to the pharmacy. That's a cash disbursement. Whatever's left over is what the PBM is paying itself. We call it earnings after cash disbursement. So the new path, so we gave you the status quo. The new path says this: ideally, do business with a fiduciary model PBM. And yes, there was talk about PBMs couldn't be fiduciary. Yes, they could. It just couldn't be forced upon them. But if they volunteered, they could be fiduciaries. And more PBMs today are at least talking about it than they were 5 years ago. And in that contract, it says I have to do everything to your benefit, and I can't act in my own best interest over yours. And if I do that, there's financial penalties that are applied. It means you know how much money I make, and I have to give you the information that you need to verify the amount of money that we make. Not every PBM is going to offer fiduciary standard, but every PBM has at one point, if it's been in business long enough and has sophisticated clients, has offered radical transparency. Every single one of them. That's the next best thing. The difference between fiduciary standard, you can have radical transparency without a fiduciary standard, but you can't have a fiduciary standard without radical transparency. Fiduciary standard is volunteered. It is, no matter how smart you are or how hard you work, we're gonna look out for you. Radical transparency, you have to drive that if the PBM isn't offering a fiduciary standard. And so this is what it looks like when a PBM says, you know what, we're just going to take a fair fee. We're going to pay our bills. We're going to cover the payroll. We're going to take employees, maybe once a year on some team building event. We're not going to fatten the pockets of the money guys and gals. And, this is just about doing the right thing. And we're going to have we're going to have some money left over at the end of the year. That earnings after cash disbursements that I was talking about, what the PBMs take home, in other words, how much the PBM is being paid, all in, including our fee, at the end of the first year, PM 23 bucks. The year before us, Prime's PM was 57, almost $58. That $35 PM difference between these two, that's the earnings after cash disbursements. At a minimum, Prime was putting in its pocket $35 per member per month just for the pharmacy benefit. That's more than what the drugs cost. That's the scary part about the whole thing. The PBMs, in many cases, are keeping and making more for themselves than what the drugs cost. Again, I told you. I because everyone's going to say, you're a PBM and we don't trust anything you say, blah, blah, blah. I told you, I'm just going to give you facts. And so here, as I'm wrapping up, because you're here, you're aware that a problem exists. And it may not even be that you want to get more transparency for your client. It could be maybe you want to get a promotion, you want to break into the industry, whatever it is. You're aware that a problem exists and you took an action. You sat in on this webinar. That's just the beginning. It's the maintenance piece that drives high levels of PBM literacy. It's the maintenance piece that allows you to sit across the table from the PBM and they have no intellectual advantage where pharmacy benefits is concerned. They have no information advantage where pharmacy benefits are concerned. There's no other program like this particular program in the world. The language that we speak is a language that benefits the buyer of PBM services. That's why we do what we do, to help. You can call it corny, whatever you want to call it, it's just the truth. And so go out online, do some research around the CPBS, read the testimonials from your peers who have been a part of the program and let them tell you what they think about the program. We've never asked for a testimonial. They've all been volunteered. The next class starts June the 2nd. And by the way, I never knew who Eli Broad was. He pronounced it Broad, not Broad. But the business school I went to, Michigan State, is named after him. I went all through college, never bothered, wasn't curious enough to learn about who this cat was. It wasn't until later after college that, you know what, I want to find out who he is, read his autobiography. I pulled this from his autobiography. He's the only person, and maybe Elon Musk at some point will be, but he's the only person to be a founder of 2 Fortune 500 companies, KB Homes and Sun Life Financial. He did that. So if he believes education is the key, who am I to question him? I'm wrapping up on this. I don't know jack about cars. What I do know is that when I need to get one repaired, I go into the car repairman and I am basically like, I'm going to get taken because I got no idea what I'm talking about. Inevitably, I refuse services that I need and probably accept some that I don't. And I end up on the side of the road. My only defense is to act like I know what I'm talking about, to bang my fist on the table, to try and convince this person on the other side, you're not going to get me today. The only other defense I have is to find a reputable auto repairman who doesn't do that to people. They don't take advantage of people who don't have as much knowledge as they do. The third option is to either learn how to repair cars or bring someone with me who's an expert in cars. There is no option to be me when I go into the car repairman. Be better than me when I go into the car repairman. Same thing with pharmacy benefits. Become PBM literate. You fix the issues. We don't need laws. We need literacy. That is my time today. This will go out in a recording. Look forward in the morning. I appreciate your time. I'm going to stick around just in case any questions come through. Everyone be safe.